The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello, and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by...
The nobody here but us dogs, that is Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are also he, him. Best line in the movie.
Man, the dog, it really snuck up on me. I was like, oh, that's gonna... the first time I didn't think it was gonna be a thing, but I was like, oh no, I've really...
I got nervous.
I'm very invested in this dog now.
Right? Dude, anytime you see a dog in a horror movie, it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
But this is the birth of the trope. But don't worry, no cruelty happened to the fictional dog or real dog.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that a spoiler? Should we? I feel like that helps a lot of people.
Oh yeah. That's almost like content warning kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're back with
anti-content warning.
Right, exactly. It's like what's that? Does the dog die website?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It does not. Good news.
Yeah. So, we're back with Man-Made Monster, which is a lesser-known original Universal horror movie. Back from the class.
Very much in the Frankenstein vein.
Oh, yeah. We've got Lon Chaney Jr., we've got Lionel Atwill, some of our old favorites, and the set definitely is using some of the parts from the original Frankenstein movies. We got all kinds of
most certainly
our favorite equipment, including the return of the spinning science wheel.
Yes, science wheel.
So it's a nice return to form for us. We haven't been in this mode for a while.
Yeah, but this movie's going to start out a little action-packed. We're going to have a speeding bus, immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, this bus, on a rainy road, out in the middle of nowhere, it takes a curve too fast, flips, and crashes into an electrical tower.
You mean the model, the RC model that they had rolled and flipped, right?
Yeah, it's so obviously a toy.
But it's fun.
Yeah. And then we get, which I feel like this is also, classic for that time period, we're going to get a lot of exposition via newspapers in this movie.
Right.
So, yeah.
They heavily rely on newspapers.
Mm-hmm. And one pops up and it says, spectacular crash, fatal to 5. Passengers die instantly, but only one survivor. Yeah. And then...
Who's that? Who's the one survivor?
Yeah. Well, we also, this... So we get these newspapers, and then pretty much right after they show the newspaper, we always get this radio newscaster who basically says the same thing that the newspaper does. I don't know why they have both of these things.
In case you can't be fucked to even bother reading.
I guess so. But yeah, so he kind of basically says the same thing, and then he adds that the lone survivor is named Dan McCormick, and he was taken to the hospital for observation.
Otherwise known as Dynamo Dan, the Electrical Man.
Yeah. So we cut right to that hospital. We meet Dan, who is Lon Chaney Jr.
Seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, he's real gregarious. He's just a fun, happy guy. He's flirting with the nurse, but not in a creepy way, just kind of playful. That he's telling jokes to the doctors.
He talks about his past on the Midway, where he ran a little show. Where he basically stuck his finger in the light socket. Don't do that, kids.
Yeah, it's basically he's a fire eater, but of electricity. He just does different stuff.
And electricity eater?
Yeah.
And, obviously, it's not hard to figure out that, like, this is why he somehow survived this crash. The electrocution that got everyone else didn't affect him. But the doctors are all
he's somehow inoculated.
Yeah. The main doctor is Dr. Lawrence, and he gives him like a business card, and he's like, "You should come see me. I'm very interested in this immunity that you have."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So then after that, we do get a mention of something called a yokel shocker, which is just like a special trick that they do to basically screw with the normies, I guess is a nice way to say it.
Yeah, he's definitely like very like carny culture. Oh, and also the Dr. Lawrence's business card, like it just says the Moors as its location.
Right. Just the Moors.
Yeah, I didn't think that was like an address, like it's just a general area of northern England. And
well, this is clearly happening in California, so maybe it's like their Thrushcross Grange or something like that,
Right.
It's like a really famous house.
Yeah, could be.
Owned by rich people. I doubt it, but it could be.
Yeah. So then we see Lawrence arriving home after seeing Dan. He talks to his niece, June.
And his servant, Wong?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit, like it's... And I think he's only in the credits as Chinese man. They do call him Wong in this, but I'm pretty sure, because I saw that in the credits and I was like, Chinese man, that's not good.
No. I literally thought, hey, listen, I thought it was going to be way worse. It's just Wong is a servant, so it's pretty much the exact same as Doctor Strange. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, they did flip that in the movies, but,
Yeah.
The initial relationship's there.
Mm-hmm. And he's not like... They're not doing any kind of like heavy stereotype kind of stuff. Like he's not...
No, he just speaks in a normal American accent.
Yeah. So not too bad.
Yeah.
And June is his niece, is the doctor's niece, but she's also kind of like his secretary, kind of takes care of stuff for him. She kind of is on him about, he's got a conference that he's coming up, that he's going to be speaking at, and he hasn't really written his speech yet. She kind of, it doesn't nag him about it, but it's kind of like, it's coming up, you got to get on that. And, also don't forget to take your meds before you go to bed and everything. And he's like, yeah, I'll take care of it.
Right. He's like, shouldn't you be going to bed now? But it's, it's a loving relationship where they're kind of nagging on each other a bit,
Yeah. They definitely care about each other. And they do mention that his speech is about electrobiology. And so she does go to bed, and then he goes into the next room, which is our previously mentioned science lab. And it's like, so everything electrical. There's all kinds of big, I don't know if those like kind of pyramid shaped things with the balls on the end and all those sparks come out. Like it's all the good like electrical science gear. And there's another doctor already working in there, and Lawrence just kind of stands behind him and watches him for a little while before he finally goes over and talks to them.
We'll find out this is Dr. Paul Regis, is how they say it, versus Regis.
Yeah.
Which that's how I think it should be said. But turns out that's Lionel Atwill.
And they kind of get in a little bit of an argument. Regis is, he's like a little bit, he's more on the like the edge of like, science. He's our Frankenstein here,
Yeah. He's putting the mad scientist, right?
Yeah.
Which he will readily admit to multiple times in this movie.
He does, absolutely. And Lawrence is like, the purpose of science is to improve life for mankind and all this, and Regis is like, no, we gotta just advance things. We need to evolve and get more powerful and stronger. And I think
we need to create a world of electrical men.
Yeah, that like somehow people will just be able to they won't need to eat anymore. They will just live off electricity.
Which there are many statements I have to make in that regard. Like, all it takes is just running out of power to kill a lot of people. So maybe don't do that.
Right, and like electricity, I think is probably harder to produce than like grain or meat. I would think.
Listen, what he should be doing is trying to turn people into plants. That way we make our own chlorophyll.
Yeah, that would be a vast improvement.
Has anyone seen Troll? Just wondering. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, and, you know, like, as you said, you know, Lawrence is like, you're challenging the forces of creation. Sometimes I think you're mad. And he's like, I am. But
Right.
so was, you know, he goes through the Galileo and lists, you know, all the, you know, forward-thinking scientists of various points in time. And he's like, madness is what breeds progress. And, you know, again, Lawrence is like, no, you know, we need to be trying to make life better. We don't need to be so concerned about progress.
Right. He even calls Paul's work black magic to a degree, right?
Yeah. The next day, a reporter shows up at the house. His name is Mark Adams. And
well, we also get a newspaper talking about Dynamo Dan walking out under his own power. Ha, 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 ha.
Oh, right. Yeah, and which leads directly into this reporter showing up, and he's talking to June and wants to be able to interview Dan, and she is holding up this newspaper, and she's disgusted by his pun about power. And he's like, come on, you know, like, I'm not making fun of the people that died. It's the living guy, you know, and our readers are interested to know what's going on. Like, you know, you should let me talk to him. And she's, you know, kind of refusing. They have like the most rom-com energy right away. Like they don't like each other, but you know they're gonna fall in love by the end of the movie. Yeah.
Well, and then also she's like, well, the only thing here is the dog, right? She's trying to stonewall Mark Adams. And then, of course, that's when the dog barks, and that's when we get the line that I mentioned earlier. It looks like there's nobody here but us dogs.
Right. Then he just sits down and he's like, all right, well, I'll just wait. I'm gonna talk to Dan whenever.
You can hear Doc and the Dan talking now.
Yeah. And so then we cut to Dan talking to Lawrence, and he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I was supposed to hitch a ride with this carnival caravan, but they left while I was in the hospital, so I guess I'm just gonna go on unemployment or something.
Unemployment insurance, sir. Now this fucking angers me. That they fucking had unemployment. What happened to unemployment insurance, Anthony? Like,
yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have capitalism? Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, Lawrence is like, you don't have to do that. Like, I'll hire you on. I could use some help around here, and I'd like to work with you anyway. So, you know, why don't you stay around here? I'll give you a place to stay. We'll feed you. And, you know, Dan's like, hell yeah, you know, money and free food and place to stay. Like, this is better than the carnival. I'm in.
Right, but you're not going to cut me open, are you, Doc? And the Dr. Lawrence is like, no, we just want you because of your immunity to electricity.
Mm-hmm. We just want to run some tests.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Regas comes in and, you know, gets introduced to Dan. And then I think it's like later on, or maybe like the next day or something, Dan is like talking to June. They also are a little flirty because he's like, you remind me of this high wire act girl that I used to be sweet on back in the day, and then she ran off with the fire eater.
Fire eater. Good stuff.
Then I think it's like the next day, Mark is back, and he's just, at this point, it's obvious. Like, he is very openly flirting with June. She's flirting back.
Yeah, he's like, hey, will you go out with me?
Yeah, and she's like, she's playing hard to get, but it's like, you know, that I feel like that phrase has gotten really like weird with like, you know, consent stuff now and everything.
Yeah,
this is like
I think
most,
it used to be a game, but now it's like, oh, he's forcing himself.
And I feel like this is such a clear example of like what the positive version of it, I guess, is that like you can tell she's into him, but she's also like pushing back a little bit and just making sure that he really wants to do this before she agrees to it.
Yeah.
She's making him work for it a little bit.
Yeah. Tease sometimes. Some people are into that, you know.
Right. And at that point, like, Dan pops in and he's like, oh, sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. And Mark's like, nah, I wasn't getting anywhere today anyway.
Right. And he's like, hey, let me show you what I taught this dog how to do. It's really neat. And he just shows the dog rolling around on the floor, which I guess that's kind of a cool little trick.
We'll find out that the dog's name is Corky.
Corky.
Dr. Regis pops in and is like, hey, Dan, come with me. We need to do some tests. And Dan's like, okay, sure. And Regis is like really adamant that the dog not come with them. Like he kind of like, he doesn't kick the dog, but he's kind of like pushes it away with his, like if you're trying to like leave the house and the dog's trying to come out and you just kind of like nudge him away with your foot. It's kind of doing that thing. And as soon as they're gone, Mark's like, man, I don't like that Regis. Like he just seems like the kind of guy who stuck pins in butterflies as a kid.
Right. And June does say, well, if it wasn't for Paul, we wouldn't, we owe him everything. I mean, maybe, but also he is kind of sketchy.
Yeah, like Lawrence, everybody seems a little skeptical of his motives, but yet they're keeping him around.
Right. Like letting him live at the house, effectively. I feel like if Lawrence was a responsible person, he'd be like, man, you're a good scientist, but get the fuck out.
Yeah, like I can't be a part of what you're working on.
Right. But no, Lawrence is a little neglectful and lets Paul do what Paul's going to do. And in this case, what Paul is going to do is strap down Dan and electrocute the shit out of him.
Yeah, like Dan's he's like, where's Dr. Lawrence? And Regis is like, oh, he's off at his conference. He just told me to continue with the tests while he's gone. And yeah, I mean, he's like strapped down. It's the Frankenstein slab. And yeah, Regis like cranks up all this electricity. There's all the sparks and everything. Here's where we get to see the science wheel in action.
Yeah.
And Regis just keeps cranking up the lever until Dan like passes out. Like he goes unconscious from so much electricity.
Right. Which luckily doesn't kill him somehow. And afterwards, Paul's like, all right, let's check the vitals to make sure our pet's still alive, our test subject's still alive.
Mm-hmm. Dan's like, what happened? Like, I feel like I blacked out or something. And, Regis is like, yeah, you must have dozed off. I just... Continuing the normal experiment, I'm just giving you the usual voltage level just so we can maintain your immunity.
Yeah, and nothing
Dan's
more.
Dan's like, okay, sure. So he heads out, but he sees Corky in the hallway, and Corky's like acting kind of scared of him, like he won't get close to him.
Right.
And then
it's like he wants Dan to get close, but he's also nervous. Yeah,
and Dan coaxes him over. But when he goes to try to pet him, electricity comes out of his hand and kind of like shocks the dog, and Corky kind of runs away.
Yeah, he says, "Fuck this shit, I'm out."
Yeah, and then like Dan's like looking at his hand, like what is going on? And then you see all these sparks coming, and they're like drawn on the film, and he ends up like shoving his hands in like a goldfish bowl to try to like stop
he walks
the
by and it arcs
power
a little bit. Yeah, and then he's like, fuck it. Let's just go whole hog and shove my hand in this goldfish bowl.
Right. Then we just cut back to the lab where Regis is making notes of how the experiment's going. There we see that he actually gave Dan 5 times the normal voltage.
Jeez.
And somehow, he just fainted, but he was okay. And, we'll see what happens next, basically. Like,
well, we'll also see a big montage.
Yes. Regis is definitely taking advantage of this time that Lawrence is away to try to get a lot accomplished. So we see a montage of a lot more shots of Dan getting electrocuted, Regis taking more notes, that like now Dan isn't fainting and in fact seems to be almost like addicted to the electricity, like he needs it.
Right. Which is pretty much what Paul's trying to do. So next we have Dr. Lawrence arriving home, and everyone's having a nice little lunch/dinner meal.
June and Mark and Lawrence and Regis, and June is like, I'm really worried about Dan. He seems off lately. Like, he just doesn't seem his usual self. And then Dan strolls in, and yeah, it's true. Like, he's just kind of zombie-like. He's like a very, charming, gregarious guy before this. So it's very noticeably different. Like, he's very just kind of sullen, quiet, not really saying anything. Right. Yeah.
And he literally just sits down, and Wong brings him a plate of special food just for him. And Dan's like, I'm just not hungry, and walks off.
And Regis is like, well, here, Dan, come with me. We'll take a look at your vitals and everything. And so once they're gone, June is like talking to Lawrence and is like, I'm I am really worried. There's something wrong going on here. And also, did you see that your goldfish all died? And Lawrence is like, oh, that's weird. Some bacteria must have got into the tank or something. And she's like, well, I tested the water, and the only thing in there was electricity.
The electricity is still in the water. Amazing. It didn't discharge at all.
Then, like a little later, we see Lawrence. He's in the lab, and he's going over all of Regis's notes from while he was gone. But it's not Regis's real notes. It's the fake notes that Regis made for Lawrence.
Right, basically just saying, yeah, I gave him the usual amount of electricity every day. Everything's fine. And then Regis comes in, and he sees Lawrence looking at his notes.
And Regis is like, oh, June sent this drink for you. I'm guessing it was his meds or something. And so he's like, oh, okay, thanks. So he, downs this glass. And then Lawrence is like, so I saw your notes. Everything looks normal. But then I saw these, like, are the test results. And some of the numbers are a little funny. Everything seems odd. You know what's going on? And Regis is like, yeah, let's here, I can explain. Let's take a look at it all. And then before he can really go into it, Lawrence starts feeling really ill. That's weird.
It's like he slipped on a Mickey.
So Regis is like, yeah, you probably just overtaxed yourself. You've been busy with the conference. Why don't you go lay down? So he does. Then we get June tucking Lawrence into bed. And, he's like, oh, it's been so long since I've been tucked into bed. She's on this that she's worried. Like, obviously, she's been around. She's seen what's been going on while Lawrence was gone. And she just knows something's not right. She's also like, you're not feeling well. Get some rest. Don't worry about it. I'm going out with Mark tonight. Just stay in, relax. Here's some of your papers if you want to read, but you should probably just sleep.
Yeah. And then we cut to Mark and June talking, and Mark immediately notes, it sounds like, just being faint like that, sounds like someone slipped him something.
Yeah, because we also, I think that while June is talking to Lawrence, we also get intercut a couple shots of Mark and Dan hanging out downstairs, and Mark is trying to show him magic tricks.
Really awful magic tricks.
But he's just completely checked out. Like, he's not even engaged in it at all. And in fact, it is like the pick a card, any card. And Dan gets so, distracted that he just, walks over to the fireplace and throws the card into the fire. Right. He just is not really aware of what's going on around him. And then, so then after Mark and June kind of report their two conversations, and that's where Mark's like, there's some weird stuff going on in this house. It seems like people are getting slipped Mickeys. And she's like, what is that? And, he's like, it's what you give somebody when you want them out of the picture for a little while.
Right. Well, at least he said that and not when you want to take advantage of them. So good for him.
Right. Yeah. June's like, I feel like I need to stay here, with Uncle Lawrence not feeling well, or Uncle John, I think is his first name, not feeling well. And, this weird stuff with Dan, I feel like I maybe need to be here. And Mark he's like, I bought us tickets. He never says to what, but there's tickets involved. And he paid good money for it, and he's a poor reporter.
$1.25?
So. Right. Yeah. And so she's like, okay, fine, let's go. So they head out, and then we see in the lab, Regis is getting ready to administer the final test. He tells Dan that this is it. This one everything will be done after this. Dan's like, all right, let's get into it. Regis is like, you kind of like these tests now, don't you? And he's like, yeah, it's the only time that I feel strong like I used to.
Yeah.
So, further emphasizing the fact that he's now addicted to this electricity.
Right.
Regis says something about okay, well, we'll get to it. I've made sure that we won't be disturbed for this important experiment.
Right. And, of course, we also get a cut with Mark and June talking, and June's like, well, I still kind of want to go back, and she seems a little distracted herself. And Mark's like, we got a lot of, things I want to do and say tonight, so, maybe we could do those first, and then we can go home later.
Yeah, he's like, I got this whole big plan. We've got the show and supper, and, I've got some things I want to tell you. It's never outright said, but it sounds like he was maybe going to propose. Finally, June's like, I want to hear what you want to say. I want supper with you. I want to do all these things, but I'm really distracted. Can we go back to the house? Let me just check in on everything, and then we can go do. Yeah,
she's like, I want to be more cooperative later, or whatever.
And Mark's like, okay, it's a deal. Like I'll meet you halfway on this. So they go to head back.
Built a relationship.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got Regis cranking the electricity on Dan again, and now he's got it like up into the danger range, and Dan is like literally like glowing. There's so much electricity in him.
Right, and Regis is reciting, "You'll be under my power once this is complete." Yeah,
and the effect of the glowing like looks really good. Like for 1941, I think, like it's pretty impressive. Yeah, like you said, as soon as he's like, Regis is able to just be like, get up off of the slab and come towards me, and Dan just like follows him like a robot. Then Regis pulls out like a big rubber suit and has Dan put it on because it's supposed to like help conserve the energy so it doesn't just waste away as quickly.
Right, he's going to retain his electricity for a little bit longer.
And around that time, Lawrence, he heard some of the experiment sounds from his room. He comes strolling in and is shocked to see what Regis has done.
Right.
He's upset and again calls Regis mad, and he's like, yeah, of course
I am mad.
But I've conquered destiny.
Right. I've created an electrical man that could be the worker of the future.
Yeah, he's like, picture an army of this creature just doing everything so that we don't have to.
You mean a slave race, right? Right. Is that what you mean, Paul?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's exactly what he means. And so Lawrence just goes over to the phone and picks it up, and Regis is like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm calling the police. Like, you have killed a guy for this weird experiment. Regis is like, yeah, I destroyed one person, but like progress, that's his big thing. Like, it's worth it. If one guy dies and it like changes the trajectory of the human race, it's worth it.
Fuck your ethics.
Right. Obviously, Lawrence doesn't agree, so he continues to dial. So Regis tells his, new robotic monster, stop him. And so Dan goes over and chokes Lawrence to death.
And of course, I do like how Paul's immediately like, hey, this was your fault. You need to keep saying that. Say that I killed him, or, that you killed him. And he has Dan repeating that I killed him. Yeah, and he like has some sort of battery type thing that he like has Dan touch, and it like drains the energy out of him into the battery. So he stops glowing, looks normal. I'm surprised it didn't kill him here.
I'm not sure. The science here obviously is. Yeah.
I don't think you can necessarily become immune to electricity exactly.
Right. And so then we get another newspaper basically saying that, Dan has killed Dr. Lawrence and admitted it, said, I killed him, in quotes, is the headline. And then we just get a little later, June going to visit the district attorney, and she's like, Dan wouldn't have done this. Like, I love my uncle. I don't want him to be, I wish he wasn't dead, but now that he's gone, I need to defend Dan because I know that he could never have done this.
Right, and of course the district attorney is going to say something that no district attorney ever would have said, and he's like, we're going to try and help Mr. McCormick as much as possible. It's like, no, most DAs are like, no, we're going to put him behind bars, he's a murderer. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, this DA seems like a little bit invested. There's one bit where he's like, you're not like dating him, are you? And she's like, no, I'm engaged to another guy.
I guess Mark got to pop the question eventually, right?
yeah, we just completely didn't get that scene. But yeah, it's it seems like he's like, okay, well, then if you don't have ulterior motives, then we'll look into it. We'll check on it. And then we see Regis in the lab. He's got the radio on, and we get the news reporter kind of saying that that Dan's being investigated, that his trial's coming up and all this for the murder. Then the DA shows up at the lab. He wants to talk to Regas and wants to see, read about the experiments. He wants just to kind of question him a little bit about the process and everything.
Yeah, Regas provides him with his doctored records. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And while that's going on, in the next room, June is talking to Mark, and she's like, do you think your newspaper would be, like, open to investigating this and see if they can, like, help us prove that Dan's innocent? Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, if we had some evidence, sure, but if I try to go to there right now with what we have, they're just gonna, like, send me away to a mental health facility. Like, this all sounds crazy.
Right, and she's hoping to kind of angle it to where maybe he can get out on on insanity plea.
Yeah, because she's like, I don't know what was happening, but I know Dan in his normal headspace would not have been able to do this. So he had to have been insane in some way, temporary or whatever. And then, so we cut to this scene. I thought this was a lawyer at first, but then, like, he's in the next...
Oh, no, it's a psychologist. It's the worst psychologist in history.
Yeah. He's, like, supposed to be, like, asking or talking to Dan to see if he's insane. But instead, he tries to just implant a memory or something, and it's like, it's like your brother or your stepfather or something abused you when you were a child, and you've wanted to...
you were in an orphanage, and your foster father beat you, basically. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? And it looks like Dan's about to break free from the mind control, but Regas still has a little bit of that power over him.
Yeah, and so, he's just like, no, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Then we go straight to the trial, and the trial is quick, and it's kind of a montage thing. It's pretty obvious. Like, the DA over and over again, just like we get the psychiatrist who's like, yeah, he's totally sane, everything's fine.
Yeah, he's suffering from acute melancholia, which basically just means depression, and he's sane enough to stand trial.
Yeah, and then we get, I think, like maybe 2 or 3 other little quick things, but it quickly goes to the jury being like, yep, he's guilty. And then the judge being like, all right.
He's sentenced to the electric chair.
Yeah, of course. So, of course he was going to get the death penalty, and of course it was going to be the electric chair. Mm-hmm. Which no one was like, hey, wait, didn't this guy already get electrocuted once and it didn't work? Right. Why would we try this? But nope, everybody's just like, yep, electric chair makes sense, let's do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. Surely it's not like riding a bus into a power line.
Right. So then we get like the classic calendar pages tearing away to show that time's passing, and like, so he gets a death sentence, and it's for like 2 weeks later or something. Like, right. Now we have like people are on death row for like decades through the appeals process and all of that. Like, it's a very, very slow process. Yeah, I mean, we should get rid of the death penalty in general, but if the death penalty is on the table, it absolutely should be a very, very slow process.
Yes. Versus putting a revolving fucking elevator or whatever you want to call it on escalator.
Yeah. So then, it's execution day. Dan is being led to the chair by, a couple guards, and I think there's like a priest there and everything. Mm-hmm. And then we see like downstairs, there's like 2 guys in like the electrical room, boiler room or whatever of the jail.
Right, they seem like 2 complete dolts, frankly.
Yeah, they're just 2 dumb worker guys, and they're just like, man, execution day. It always kind of bums me out. I hate doing this. And then we also get like a reporter upstairs on the phone, like kind of talking to, the dispatch desk or whatever at the paper.
He's about to go in.
And then back down in the electrical room, the guys see like the needles on all their electrical equipment they're like jumping. They're like, that's weird, that shouldn't be happening. So they call upstairs, and they're talking to a guard, and he's like,
I don't know what the hell's happening.
Yeah, and then like I think the reporter gets the word. They've shocked him like 3 times, and he's just like totally fine.
Right, and then immediately after, it turns out he just killed 2 guards, and then he busts out of the room. Yeah,
but he's got like the warden in front of him. He's kind of like holding him hostage, but like, usually when you got somebody being held hostage, they're kind of like, in a headlock kind of position or something.
Right, but this is not the same thing. He's like right behind the warden, almost touching him. It's almost like, I'm not touching you.
Exactly. Yeah, because, obviously he's like glowing again, so no one wants to come into contact with him. They go to the prison gate. Dan blasts the door open. This is basically like Shocker, the Wes Craven movie, or Ernest Goes to Jail.
Yes, it's a little bit of both, really. Yeah. Because in Shocker, I think it actually eventually killed the serial killer, versus Ernest Goes to Jail, where he breaks free with his electricity powers.
Right. Yeah, so he kind of continues out with the warden as a hostage. But then we get the DA in this is really quick to just give all the information about what's going on to reporters.
Right.
He's got a room full of reporters, and he's like, yeah, he did killed a couple guards. He escaped with the warden, but this electricity, he can't survive more than 3 hours before he burns out of juice. So he should be dying any time now. It'll be fine.
Right. Where did they get that though? I don't think Paul told them. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. This number is just completely made up. I don't...
It's there to put a time limit on the movie, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then we get the radio reporter talking again and says the warden was found dead. He was electrocuted, but no sign of Dan. He escaped somewhere into the woods.
Man, it'd be really great if we got to see that. That would be really cool. I guess it's too graphic for the time.
A lot of this movie, even, Dan getting electrocuted in the chair and then killing guards and escaping, it's all the reporters talking about it happening. We don't see any of it. I think it's for budgetary reasons. I'm sure they couldn't show those things, or I don't know, maybe they were too edgy for the time.
Yeah, it could have been either one.
Then we see Dan. He comes upon a fisherman and his wife in a car. And the fisherman gets out to open a gate or something. Dan goes up to the car. The wife gets scared and faints.
Right, I thought he almost touched her.
Mm-hmm. But nope, he just wants those rubber fishing boots to act as insulators.
So he's got a power up now.
Right.
Keep him going for a little bit longer.
And then the fisherman goes to a payphone and just calls the DA to let him know what's going on. And it's you just have you're just a random person and you have the DA's phone number just...
Versus calling the cops.
Maybe 911 was... When did that become a thing? I know that's a relatively recent thing. It wasn't always...
Yeah. I don't know. But also then I feel like if Andy Griffith has taught me anything, you just pick up the phone and hit 0 and then rotate it. And then you'll call the message board and get somebody, right?
Right.
That's how that works.
Yeah. But yeah, so the fisherman tells the DA, of course, I think this was the escaped convict. He scared my wife and he stole my rubber fishing boots. And the DA's like, oh no, not rubber fishing boots.
Right. That'll keep him alive for a couple hours longer.
Yeah. So immediately, all of the reporters are still in the room with the DA, and they're like, oh, where is he? All right, we're going to go all rush out there and try to find him. So they all head out. Meanwhile, Dan comes upon, a hay wagon full of, workers.
I was thinking it was a hayride, because it's this is too anachronistic. There is no reason for this whatsoever.
But either way, he ends up, electrocuting the guy, driving the horses.
Well, the guy tries to whip him, and he's not Simon Belmont, so that's not going to work.
And then, because the electricity, goes up the whip, right? Is that how it ends up happening? And then the cart just kind of goes wild because the guy driving has been electrocuted, and it bumps Dan as it goes past, and the hay just immediately catches on fire from touching him.
Which is fair. Yeah. Hay's pretty flammable.
Right. Dan keeps going, and we get a little bit from the reporters, and they're like, oh, where he is, he must be headed to the lab. He must be going back to where he came from.
Yeah, he's going to the moors. How do they know that? I guess maybe there's only one path to the moors. Who knows?
Right. So then we cut to the lab where June is snooping through all of Dr. Regis's paperwork, and then he strolls in and sees it and is like, find anything interesting in there? And she's like, oh, I was just cleaning, just tidying up a little bit.
He's like, if you want to know, here's the actual notes that I took. Not those bullshit notes.
Yeah, it just goes right into villain monologue mode. He's proud of what he did, and so she's like, "Wait, so you did this to Dan? You killed Dan?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever. We got to break a few eggs to make an omelet."
Right.
And she's like, "I can't believe we were trying to test Dan for insanity when you've been the crazy one all along." And he's like, "Yeah, I am."
Yep, sure am. That's me. At least he's honest about his crazy.
Yeah, he's not ashamed about it at all. And then he's like, I've only done the one human test, but I've done a lot of animal tests, and from what I can tell, the females of the species sure take to the electricity a lot better. Let's play a little game. So he straps her down to the Frankenstein slab.
Right, but basically tries to make a bride of the electrical man.
Pretty much. But before he can do anything, Dan bursts in, and Regis is like, "I command you, stop. And now Dan is...
Yeah, but Dan's not about that.
Yeah. So he keeps coming towards Regis. And I thought this was kind of cool. The Regis goes to trying to run out of the room and slam the door behind him. And he's holding the doorknob, and Dan grabs the other side of the doorknob to pull the door open and electrocutes Regis through the metal of the doorknobs.
Yeah, ain't that the bitch about connectivity? But yeah, that's a great kill.
Yeah, so now Regis is dead. Dan goes and finds his original rubber suit, puts that on, and then...
no, he could stay alive indefinitely now.
Yeah. So he, frees June from the straps on the table, and then, picks her up in our classic, monster style, and walks out of the house with her and goes into the woods. And at that point, all the cops start arriving. They burst into the house. They find Regis is dead. And they're like, Dan must have escaped. We got to chase after him.
They find him pretty quickly, but they're like, if we do anything, it'll mess with his suit and it'll electrocute June and kill her. So we can't do anything.
Yeah.
But luckily, Dan's dumb now.
Right. So he just walks straight into a barbed wire fence, and they're like, "Oh no, if that barbed wire cuts through the suit, it could be bad." And thankfully, because he's trying to get untangled, he sets June down while he's working, but he's unable to get untangled. The wire does cut through the suit, and then that saps away all of his electricity. We just see it passing out of his body through the fence,
right?
And he's completely drained. As he's kind of falling over dead, we get Corky the dog coming up, and he starts howling with sadness. Yeah, and then as Dan falls down dead, he cuddles up on his chest as he's dead. It's a very sweet, sad moment. June and Mark are kind of cuddled up, she's safe now, but she's sad to see Dan dying. Cut to which I think a lot of the Frankenstein movies we watched, that would have been it. That's sad it. Dog couple watching him die, the end. But no, we actually get a little bit of a capper scene here at the end. Mark has Regis's notebook, and he's like, "This has got everything. This is the whole story.
This will win me a Pulitzer, right?"
And June's like, "Yeah, I mean that's all well and good, but if we publish this, do you really want all this information out there in the world? Someone else could do this to somebody else. We know what happened to Dan. We don't want that to happen to someone else." And Mark, he's just like, "Yeah, you're right." And he carries it over and chucks it in the fireplace.
Okay, so here I have that's the roughly abrupt but not really ending. So I have a feeling, I have opinions about this. First off, they don't have to publish the entire fucking thing. And two, that would definitely, reveal the truth about what happened to Dan. So he's not remembered as a fucking monster. And Regis is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would be the way to go about this is tell the story, not,
omit some things.
Turn the notebook over to the authorities or something. Yeah, I mean, I guess, sometimes we get these things where noble scientists are like, I can't even give this to, if the military gets their hands on this, they'll turn it into weapons or something. So it's like is it Serizawa, the scientist at the end of the first Godzilla movie who has to get rid of the oxygen destroyer so that the military can't have it. So in sci-fi there is definitely a tradition of that, but yeah, it seemed like there is a way to clear Dan's name while also not unleashing this.
I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's a small book called Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley, where Dr. Frankenstein tells him the story, but doesn't tell Walton how he did it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
exactly, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Right.
They only watched the movie, they didn't read the book.
Right. Yeah, because, if you do that right, it becomes not instructions on how to do a bad thing. It becomes a cautionary tale to warn people not to do the bad thing, which, again, is, that's the Frankenstein story. That's, so this one, it's like they haven't quite learned the lesson that they were supposed to, but I guess at least they're not spreading dangerous information. So they got part of it, but not the whole thing.
I guess they did the best they could with what they had. Sad. No. But it's a pretty good movie. Yeah,
it definitely is just basically a Frankenstein knockoff that's trying to be a little bit more sci-fi, a little less gothic, a little more, definitely more modern. I feel like this came out in 1941. I feel like a couple years later, if it had been made, it would have been all about nuclear radiation.
Right.
But here it's just electricity. It's, it's modern science. And there definitely are, nuclear Frankenstein stories that came later. But this definitely feels like a proto version of that.
100%. Not bad, though.
Yeah, it was nice to see Lon Chaney in something again. He's great in it, especially Lon Chaney's kind of often seems kind of one note and is mostly just like the guy that they put makeup on, but here
or that just wants to die.
Yeah, but being the charming version of Dan, and then the sort of zombified version of him at the end, he kind of gets to do some different stuff and does pretty well with both versions. And as the electricity's getting him, they do a lot of makeup to make him look like he's kind of aging and kind of shriveling up. And obviously the glow that they do looks pretty good for black and white movie that they probably had to paint on to make it look that way. So it's definitely it's a fun, lesser known Universal movie that's definitely worth and I think it's literally 1 hour long, so it's
exactly
for sure worth your time.
All right, where can they find us, Anthony?
So you can find us on all the socials at The Frankencast. You can find us at YouTube. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. And you can always find us over at patreon.com/thefrankencast, where we're still doing free trials. You can get 1 week for free, binge whatever you want, see if you want to stick around. We'd love to have you over there.
Yeah, a lot of people have taken advantage of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, Anthony, we kind of dipped our toe back in the past, but we've been living kind of in a more modern realm. So let's keep that going on with the new-ish movie, Young E. I believe it's a Korean film?
Yeah, I believe so. And I'm pretty sure it came out this year also, or very late last year. But yeah, it's another one that's sort of playing with more modern themes and different ways to approach the Frankenstein story. So definitely excited to go to a different country and see what they have to say about Frankenstein.
Yeah, it definitely came out early this year, but yeah, it's interesting to see. We haven't been to South Korea yet. We've been to Japan, we've been to Germany, we've been all around the world almost. We've definitely been to South America a couple times. But yeah, this is our first South Korean trip, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, in that case, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.